Today we're going to talk about someone who's fought Vikings, Nia Jax's actual biggest fan, and someone who literally cannot open a tin of pineapple chunks to make coronation chicken. It's time to talk Becky Lynch, it's time to talk Clown College, it's time to talk the man. There are very few people who've ever taken this circuitous a route to get to the top of WWE and the top of wrestling in general. The man lives in almost everyone's head rent-free, but she gave up on wrestling multiple times and had to be talked back into it. This is someone who says openly wrestling saved her life. So if there's going to be fun facts, they're going to be all around the man, Becky Lynch. Let's dive in. Number 1, she's fought in a Viking war. Becky Lynch has many film and TV credits to her name. It's one of the many reasons with her contract set to expire relatively soon, I sort of do expect we're going to see her in Hollywood at least briefly while still wrestling under the WWE banner. She appeared briefly as a stunt person in season 1 of the TV show Vikings, a show that in later years would feature Edge, now known as Adam Copeland in AEW. Becky being Becky wasn't able to just be a pretty face and show up on the sidelines, she was there to pick a fight, and pick a fight she did. Absolutely going mental on a few good old-fashioned Vikings in a way that stunt women rarely do. Becky Lynch's physicality was clear even then, and this is well before she built up to the level that she is as the man at current. Number 2, she worked as an air stewardess for Air Lingus. Most people outside of the UK aren't familiar with Air Lingus, but as someone who's flown on them several times myself, I give her immense credit for stepping back onto the plane after that first time. Air Lingus is a very small airline that flies primarily between England and Northern Ireland. Becky worked as a stewardess for 4 years and is open about the fact that she did not enjoy it, having been talked into taking the role by her mother, who was trying to steer her away from wrestling, a dangerous sport after all. It also raises a very genuine possibility that Becky and I have actually been on the same plane, but because Becky Lynch was Rebecca Quinn then, and because I would have been quite young and unaware of what was going on in the world of wrestling, I probably didn't realise. For which I can only apologise, but we can't really tell the future, can we? Number 3, she was trained by Finn Balor. The man character shows quite clearly that there's some demon in the blood, and this came directly from a very early partnership working and training with Finn Balor. This is before he eventually became Prince Devitt and made the big impact that he did for Bullet Club on New Japan. Prince Devitt, or Finn Balor as he's known now, was big in the Irish wrestling scene and was one of the most prominent figures, so much so that he had his own wrestling school, which Becky Lynch started at around the age of 15. The fact that they are both now in WWE is a huge boon to both and really shows the level of talent that they were able to draw out of each other, especially when you consider Becky doesn't herself believe that she's a very talented wrestler. She simply believes that she's learned the moves, and Finn Balor gets the credit for that. I also think it's interesting seeing how her relationships have developed in the WWE, particularly given that before Becky Lynch was in a relationship with Seth Rollins, it sure felt like on screen Finn Balor was. As much as I miss those beautiful moments, I would miss the beautiful moments we have now if we went back. Number 4, NXT Creative pitched the idea of Becky Lynch being bald. NXT Creative is going to pop up quite often here, mostly in negative ways. Freddie Prinze Jr., who was a writer for the WWE at the time, explained that the WWE and NXT Creative got together and pitched the idea of Becky Lynch being bald in a hair versus hair match. It's incredibly difficult now to picture Becky Lynch without her trademark hair, a re-dye job clearly in play recently on Raw, and she's looking better than ever. Still, if you've ever watched Total Divas, you'll be fully aware that the WWE are real particular when it comes to hair colours. Nobody is allowed to match and nobody is allowed to overlap. So if there was anyone else with a bit of red in their hair, Becky Lynch may have been told to get rid of the whole damn lot. Number 5, she went to Clown College. This one's a pretty popular piece of trivia, but Becky Lynch spent 3 years working at Clown College to get a degree in clownery, something which she does have differing opinions on even in and of herself. She has credited it with a lot of her WWE character development, the facial expressions and the overall comedy routine that often slips into the wrestling. This also was not what made her successful. In fact, what made her successful was stepping away from the clownery. Since then, she's mentioned on the Sam Roberts podcast that it wasn't for her and it was a complete waste of time. And while that may be her opinion now, I do think a large part of it does play into a lot of the overall character that she plays at times, particularly outside of the WWE main roster and more to side projects such as Up Up Down Down, where she definitely has a bit of clown in her. Number 6, in 2009, Becky Lynch retired from wrestling. You wouldn't think it now, given that she debuted in NXT in 2012, 3 years later, but in 2009, following a concussion, Becky Lynch gave up on wrestling. She tied a little bow around it, she grieved for it, and she said goodbye. While wrestling had always been Becky Lynch's dream, she definitely went through phases with it, and this is something she's discussed at length. Finn Balor, however, had always been a fan, had always been committed, and in many ways his overall success convinced Becky Lynch to give it another try. And of course, his success in NXT was a precursor to her own. I don't think it's unfair to say that without Finn Balor, we don't get Becky Lynch. Number 7, NXT Creative set her up to fail. NXT was going through a difficult phase in 2013 when a lot of the biggest women's wrestlers in the world now were in the process of debuting and starting out their careers. A lot of the women's wrestlers there didn't have clearly defined characters, and there are many times a wrestler would be told, "You're about to debut, whatever your last character was, that's who you are now." Alexa Bliss has mentioned this in the time when she debuted. Essentially, she was a fairy. Becky Lynch's initial character was Irish. That was her whole personality. To say that she was given nothing to work with is a massive understatement and a real bad indictment of where wrestling was at that time, particularly women's wrestling and particularly NXT. She later would become a part of the Four Horsewomen, not by WWE design, but by her own, and her sheer determination to succeed forced WWE to endorse her. It wasn't really until 2017 that the WWE actually started to recognise Becky Lynch for what she was. Thankfully, by that point, she'd been champion a number of times and really made her mark on the industry. She became undeniable, but she was set up originally to fail. She's also confirmed a CBS report that the WWE were considering firing her shortly before she debuted. This is true of a number of wrestlers who go on to do great things, such as, for example, Chris Jericho's WWE run as well. Number 8, she is now involved in WWE Creative. A far cry from how she started out, Becky Lynch nowadays is directly involved with the planning of her storylines, particularly as regards choosing her opponents and how long she works with them. This is true of a number of wrestlers such as most notably Asuka, Liv Morgan and Doudrop before she would return to her actual name of Piper Niven. Becky Lynch chooses her own opponents. This is one of the reasons we're heading towards Rhea Ripley, and it's one of the reasons she's worked with Shayna Baszler, even though Shayna Baszler was still in NXT at the time. The one exception, of course, is Ronda Rousey, but you can't get everything you hope for. Becky Lynch nowadays is working directly with Creative to try and increase the overall chances gained for lots of different women's wrestlers. This includes a little involvement in the booking of Rhea Ripley's title reign. Number 9, Becky Lynch is Nia Jax's biggest fan. This may need some explaining, particularly with the fandom so determined that Nia Jax is the worst thing to ever happen to wrestling, but Becky Lynch completely disagrees. The accidental punch to the face, which set off not just the man character, but also that one infamous, endless image of Becky Lynch, blood streaming down her face, standing triumphant on the way out of a Monday Night Raw, having been victorious over the entire roster. That comes down to Nia Jax, and Becky Lynch gives her credit despite the accidental nature of it. Becky Lynch has nothing but respect for Nia Jax, recently choosing once again to work with her in her recent return. A recent return which has earned rave reviews from many for Nia Jax. Becky Lynch working with her directly seems to have been a big help, and this is where Becky Lynch has been involved in the Rhea Ripley title reign. This is where it comes in. She's been heavily involved in helping Nia Jax with her push. And finally, number 10, she cannot use a can opener. She cannot get her coronation chicken. This is a personal one, and really it's going to be something overarching about her use of social media. But the reason I'm a Becky Lynch fan, beyond the fact that we both have Irish blood, is one random stream that she went live many, many years ago, early in her career, where she could not open a can of pineapple chunks, she could not make her coronation chicken, and she had a full-scale breakdown. This is Becky at her most relatable. We've all had that moment where we just want one thing and we just can't have it, and we're not happy and we're miserable because of it. That's Becky Lynch. That's who she is. That expression of frustration is what has caught so many people into her orbit. And it is also why she's so good at social media. She acts emotional. She acts in a realistic way. She is a person and not a character. That is why Becky Lynch is a success that she is. If you have any more facts about Becky Lynch, drop them in the comments below. In the meantime, if you want fun facts on Randy Orton, click the video on the screen now.